the thing that keeps coming back to me that I really hate the idea of, because, I've lost loved ones in similar things, is finding out too late.
What's the end goal with this company? I mean, where do you see this whole thing transpiring into? What's the impact?
The impact is, hi, I'm Arnold. I'm one of the co-founders of Unbound, a preventative health startup helping people make lifestyle changes that last. My story starts in Cameroon. So born in Cameroon, Central Africa. Viewers might be familiar with the term TCK, or third culture kid. So ultimately someone who's raised in cultures that are different to their parents. You either see people fall in the category of they feel uprooted and don't have a specific home in any particular place, or on the flip side, which I've been very fortunate with, is I feel at home everywhere. And I've also been lucky that the countries I've moved to, for the most part, have really been welcoming of me as well. My biggest fear, I think, is looking back when I'm older and thinking, I regret not having done more, I regret not having said that. I don't want to live a life of regret. And so to the extent that I can be honest in the moment and truthful and move the needle, then I 100% feel like it's my duty to.
You've got the visa now, you're working for Goldman Sachs, wow, you've technically made it. So then what happens? Why are we here?
Yeah, no, it's funny because
Arnold, thank you so much for coming to the pod.
Thank you for having me.
It's been quite interesting. We had a little bit of conversation before we started the pod. I'm excited for this episode. And before we get into your new business, which even I don't know about, I know you've kept it a little bit of secret. I know I saw your LinkedIn profile as well, and it does show you on stealth mode. 100%. So hopefully this will be the first time people get first dibs. I'm getting in life first dibs on your new business. But before we get into all that, let's just walk me through where it all started. You're obviously in London now. When did you move here? Why did you move here? Where are you originally from?
Awesome, yeah, 100%. So my story starts in Cameroon. So born in Cameroon, Central Africa. And basically the context of the time is my parents had been married the year prior. Dad worked as a civil servant and my mum was a teacher. But unfortunately, our currency had a massive devaluation the year that they got married, meaning that their salaries were completely halved overnight. And what that meant was my parents, who absolutely loved their country, were forced to think about, how is it that we make things work? And for my dad, it was either stay in the country, but go down a path which would very much be about corruption and politics in a way that he really didn't want to go down, or seek avenues new elsewhere. And so only when I was 1 year old, my dad had to go for a year away into France with his fellowship to do with the United Nations. So I had stories from my mum where he'd be calling from the office phone and actually got caught a few times because he wasn't allowed to be making those sort of calls back home. But you can imagine a year away from his newborn son was quite difficult. It was quite difficult for my mum, but it's the sacrifices that they had to make quite early on. And fortunately, he got a role at the United Nations in the Netherlands, so dealing with the Yugoslavian war crimes. So we moved there when I was 1 year old, spent a year there when my little sister was born. And then they opened up a tribunal in Tanzania to deal with the Rwandan genocide. So big element of law in my family and, justice. So we moved to Tanzania, a place called Arusha, which people might be familiar with if they ever climb Mount Kilimanjaro because it's right at the bedrock. So for me, one of the core memories is, waking up and seeing the peak of Africa in front of me and always thinking, I want to summit that one day.
Oh, wow.
It's a really, really impressive and meaningful thing to me. And so I spent 10 years in Tanzania in a British school, very diverse, multicultural, a really beautiful upbringing there. I feel very lucky to have spent time there. But as the UN was closing around there, we had to look for opportunities elsewhere. So we ended up moving to South Africa for 3 years, which I know we'll speak about probably in a little bit of depth, because I think as an 11-year-old moving to South Africa, there was a lot about myself and my identity that I really had to contend with. And then finally from South Africa, I moved to Kenya for 3 years where I did my high school education. And then from there, it was kind of, where to next for university. And because it was an international school, a lot of people went to the States, Australia, Canada, the UK. But I always had this weird obsession with the UK. I don't know if it's because I support Arsenal Football Club, and I thought, it'd be great to go and spend time there. But I moved to the UK in 2012, so went to University of Leeds, and then eventually moved down to London in 2016, where I started working in banking. So did 5 years at Goldman Sachs, and then a year at Wellington, which is a boutique asset manager, before making my foray into startups.
Wow, that's a journey. It's also interesting how you've summarized so many different countries in like 2 minutes. Okay, let's talk through your moves. I think has that shaped you, or has that been your move to the UK? Has it been relatively easier because you've been to so many countries and lived in so many countries? Has that
Yeah.
impacted you in any way?
Yeah, for sure. I feel very lucky. So viewers might be familiar with the term TCK, or third culture kid.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately someone who's raised in cultures that are different to their parents. And I think having moved around so much, you either see people fall in the category of they feel uprooted and don't have a specific home in any particular place, or on the flip side, which I've been very fortunate with, is I feel at home everywhere. And I've also been lucky that the countries I've moved to, for the most part, have really been welcoming of me as well. So moving to the UK, I had a lot of friends here already who'd moved with me as well. So kind of starting afresh, moving so much helped me realize that wherever you move, if you come with an element of positivity, openness, wanting to get to know people, you'll be able to hopefully build a network. And so, yeah, those moves really helped me make this move to the UK a lot more seamless than probably otherwise.
Is that also all countries? Do countries matter? I mean, the acceptance of a particular country. I mean, have you had similar experiences in every country that you've gone?
Definitely not. Definitely not. So I'd actually say until my move to South Africa, so from Tanzania to South Africa, I was 11, so probably the first time I really remember moving. So having to say goodbye to all my friends was quite like a difficult experience, thinking I have to start from scratch. But then it was also compounded by the fact that for the first time, I really felt that there were differences in how I was being treated because of the color of my skin. So for context, in Tanzania, predominantly black country, my school was very diverse, but we didn't really care. It's like my friend's my friend. The color of your skin doesn't really mean anything to me. It wasn't something that we really even talked about. But flipped on its head when I moved to South Africa, it was almost front and center. We're speaking about a country that had, only decades ago come out of one of the most difficult situations any people should ever go through. And so you still have people's grandparents and parents who have grown up in apartheid. And naturally that trauma is also kind of passed down to the youth. And so it was difficult to kind of realize, okay, like there is a perception of the world on me, and I need to figure out how I react to that and how I step up to that challenge. And one of the core experiences which really shaped me and my thinking now was I gone to one of my friend's house, and his granddad rocked up unannounced. And so his granddad is an Afrikaner. And his dad told me, hey, mate, you need to go and hide under the bed because,
Wow.
the granddad can't know that you're here. And so for a kid of my age, you can imagine what that does to your thinking. You're like, wait, so a responsible adult has told me to go and hide under a bed because I can't be seen because of the color of my skin. So yeah, it was a big wake up call. It's something that I don't even think I mentioned to my parents until years later, but it really did something to me in terms of thinking, if I'm going to ever try and make something of myself in this world, I really need to be quite like dogged and intentional about, fighting the challenges that many people like myself and others are having to face due to the color of their skin.
How did, at that time, I don't know if you recall, but how does it make like a young child feel at that time when you're going through the experience? Like what are the thoughts in your mind?
Confusion, just a lot of confusion, because my parents from day dot had always, made us know about the history of the world and it was always been a topic of conversation in our house. But it's one thing to read about it, it's another thing to experience it firsthand. And so for me, I just remember thinking, like, every time I met anyone who was just at the time like white, it would make me feel like, what do you really think about me? It's one thing to imagine what someone might be thinking. It's another thing for someone to say it out loud and outright. So it just made me really have to rethink my relationships with people, my perception of myself, all those sort of things that I guess an 11-year-old doesn't need to really be thinking about. But ultimately, I'd say the biggest takeaway was like a positive one, in that I was like, right, if this is how, some people, fortunately, mainly the elderly in that situation, see the world, the fact that his grandson, my friend, doesn't see the world that way means that hopefully there's something happening that's different. And so if anything, it was like, how can we continue to have conversations amongst ourselves, make sure that we see eye to eye, that we're really moving the needle in the right direction. So it's more like a call to arms eventually, after a lot of the wallowing and not feeling so great about myself, because there's definitely a lot of that as well. Yeah.
But it's also so interesting. I mean, I live by the rule of how life is all about perspective. I think that, and that is your perspective, because you could be in that negative headspace, but then it only takes you that far. Because I mean, I can only imagine now what's going in your head, because you're talking about, okay, so you're now in South Africa, now this white person, what is this white person thinking about me? And even if it's front and center, and sometimes if it's not front and center, even if they're not maybe thinking about whatever, but you're thinking about it, like you're just internalizing it and you're just overthinking about it as well. And then for the most part, it could be very difficult as well as an individual to actually flourish and actually stand out, or even try and do more, because it's like, I mean, no matter what I do, I know this person is thinking something differently about me. So I mean, you're kind of failing before you even start. I mean, it's like a really tricky position to be in. So then you think, why should I even start? Why do I even bother? Because you could get into that headspace as well.
And many people do.
Yeah.
And I can completely see how that can be the case. It's when there's so many reasons to feel like you're constantly having to push and push and push in a way that maybe other people don't, it can be quite demoralizing, right? But I think what helped me, at least in that situation, was still that childish naivete, like a healthy level of naivete that, this is one isolated incident. This guy is much older than me. This is something that hopefully we can change moving forward. And it's kind of continued to carry on through my life, and I'm sure we'll speak about it, but there's been so many similar instances where I felt compelled to stand up or speak out and support people who might be going through similar things. I've been so fortunate that I've had mentors in, more corporate contexts as well, who have also stood up and fought for me on my behalf, because, it's kind of like that whole analogy of, we're only where we are because we can stand on the shoulders of, the people who fought so hard before us. And so to the extent that I can continue to, kind of bring people up with me and then bring more people up, then, we're moving in the right direction. And I think as long as we can keep helping one another and, going in that direction, however long it takes, then that's a positive thing.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, that statement that you made as well. It's very important for us to remind ourselves how tough, actually it's difficult today, but it was way more difficult back in the days.
Man.
So I think somehow it also becomes our fundamental duty to keep fighting that fight, because it's like, man, like people fought the fight. I mean, we have it easy today,
We have it so easy.
And I think, and if now we're in a space where, okay, it's a systemic problem, okay, again, what's the point? And if I keep talking about it, nothing really changes, so I'm not going to do anything. I think that is just doing a disservice to all these people who've literally given their lives,
No, I couldn't agree more. I really couldn't agree more. It's the world has come a long way, a really long way. And like you say, it would be remiss of us not to do our duty. And so if I can speak with words and actions and inspire and change, then I 100% will. Because my biggest fear, I think, is looking back when I'm older and thinking, I regret not having done more. I regret not having said that. Like, I don't want to live a life of regret. And so to the extent that I can be honest in the moment and truthful and move the needle, then I 100% feel like it's my duty to.
Yeah, I'm going in a little bit different tangent simply because we're on this topic.
Yeah.
And I think also fundamentally, again, it's our duty to somehow stop it in this generation, because we have the knowledge, we have the tools, we have the mindset is completely different from the generation previous. So I mean, fundamentally, how can we now stop it at our generation and make it a better world for the next generation? I think that also fundamentally, like, I think is our duty.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm so happy to already see some of these things manifest. Like, again, we're probably in one of the most cosmopolitan places in the world here in London. And so very fortunate to just see how diversity is just the way it is. It's a cultural melting pot where so many people are getting on in a really positive way. And so it's, you know, how do we continue to push that narrative? And I've come across so many incredible organizations, people from different walks of life, just continuing to do that. And even in the corporate setting, which I feel like until, you know, lockdown and some of the things that happened, which I think we'll speak about, with, you know, the blatant murders of people like George Floyd in the States, I just saw a real level of honesty and candor from everyone to try and move past some of the most tragic things that we've seen. And speaking with my friends who are still in corporate now, it seems like it wasn't one of those things that just happened and, oh, we're back to normal. It seems like, again, things are really, efforts that have come off the back of that are really like pushing on. And I hope it can continue.
Yeah,
for sure.
So talking about London, you know, and I think you're good. I mean, it'll be interesting to hear your thoughts, because obviously you've had all these experiences in different countries. Some countries that have been relatively multicultural, some countries not.
Yeah.
So how would you say London is different from those countries? Like, I mean, what are the things that really stand out for you?
London is, yeah, easily the most multicultural city that I've lived in, for sure. I went to international schools in Kenya, where I think our school had like 70 different nationalities. I'm not sure how many it is in London, but I think it'll far eclipse that.
Yeah.
And I think it's the element of just seeing how people embrace different elements of different cultures and thinkings. Like, I mean, you know, the fact that I have the benefit of having some best friends who are Indian and I love Indian food, the fact that they've come to my home and had Cameroonian food and meals with me, you know, the fact that I've got friends who across the different countries that I've lived in have come to London to live here, or just come to London, you know, to go elsewhere. Like, all roads in many ways lead or come through London. And so it just breeds like all this beauty. I've always said there is beauty in diversity. You either choose to see it as a negative thing, or you choose to embrace the things that come from it. And like, if you just think about the incredible companies, people, ideas that have come out of here, that has to have something to do with just the ability to be shoulder to shoulder with people from different perspectives. And that, I think, is what makes London so different to anywhere else that I've lived. Arusha in Tanzania was very much a village before the United Nations went there. The Netherlands, when we lived in The Hague. The Hague is a city by all means, but again, much smaller than London. Nairobi, an incredible cosmopolitan city. If anyone hasn't been, I would highly recommend. The capital of Kenya is also going in that direction. But again, like, London just has that something that I've never come across before. It has that energy, that buzz, that feeling of anything is possible, that I just have never seen in my life.
You know, also what's interesting, you know, on the topic of race, what's also interesting, and we spoke about our fundamental duty to make a change and all that. And you actually kind of see more race when you, or there's racism If you're in a space where there are different races. So for example, you evidently first saw that when you were in South Africa, because you're like, oh shit, like there's different skin colors, and then
Yeah.
and the incident that, or the experience that you went through. But the reality is, it's only when you're in an environment where there's racism are you also educated about race, and then you have the opportunity to do something about it. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense, because if you're in a society where there's just that one race, you obviously are oblivious to also then what is happening around the world. So you might think, okay, this is a safer space because there is no racism. Everybody looks like me. Everybody talks like me, and we're on the same. But only when you come out to different multicultural societies will you somehow, maybe it's hard, but it's only because it's hard are you aware and then educated and then are able to do something about it. Does that make sense?
No,
Because there's direct correlation to that,
It makes perfect sense because, again, to your point, when I lived in Tanzania and I mentioned the idea of race wasn't even a thing to me because it was a predominantly black country, and even though there was, like Indians and white people as well, we just never really talked about it. It was just kind of like, oh, everything's fine. But when we, put it all together in a place like London, by all means, you need to talk about these things. And there's so many lived experiences that I've been able to share, and so many things that I've learned from my peers of different backgrounds. And I think we can also add gender as well to that.
Yeah.
There's so many things that I've come to learn through my sister and my friends who are women as well. And so you have this opportunity, if you're intentional, to continuously learn about how you might be privileged or how you might not be privileged. And I think what I've found really good, maybe again, I don't know if this is everyone's experience, but out of the network of people that I've come to meet, for the most part, people have been very willing to have open and honest dialogues. And for the situations where people aren't, willing or receptive, then it's good to know that and then decide what to do with it, And when I'm talking about this, I'm thinking very specifically about when I was working in banking, and I was, after George Floyd was murdered, we had an opportunity amongst us in the firm to speak very candidly about our lived experiences as Black people. And you can imagine I was in a team of, I think 12 people. I was the only Black person. I had one Indian colleague, and then everyone else was from very similar sort of white backgrounds. And just telling them some of the experiences that I have, you could just see some of them, their jaws dropping, not because they wouldn't know otherwise. A lot of them just hadn't had the situation to even think like, this is really what you do before you come to work every day. Like, I think one of the examples that we'd used was, one of my really good friends, he had done really well for himself and he wanted to buy like a really nice car. But the thought he has in his head is, if I drive this car, then I'm more likely to get stopped by the police because they're going to think that I'm a good for nothing. Or the fact that I said to them, when you guys go on holiday, you might just be looking for like, really sunny places to go to, by a beach and all this like nice stuff. But then you ever add the layer on top of that, which is, does this country have many Black people? Because if it doesn't, then am I going to feel safe there? Have they ever experienced Black people before? So something as seemingly harmless and enjoyable as a holiday is all of a sudden becoming like, I need to put this filter of, am I going to be safe in this country? And many of them are like, whoa, So there's just so many conversations and layers when you like just unpeel this whole experience, that off the back of that, I know for a fact, many people walked away thinking, I'm going to be actively different. And one of my colleagues, for example, I can't remember the stat at the time, but there's something silly about children books and the main sort of protagonist being like, I think 80% white. And then the next person after that is like a made up character. And then way down to like the lower than 10% is people of like any other like ethnicity, right? And so her actively then saying, I'm going to go and buy books for my daughter that have diverse people in it. That in and of itself was like, that's huge, right? This is her being intentional about helping that next generation to think and see the world differently. So yeah, it's coming back to your earlier point, I think being in situations like this where you have to think about these, if you can use those to have those conversations, then hopefully some good things can come from them.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think London is beautiful from that perspective. I mean, I've seen the different diverse cities, but I think London just has a I don't know. I mean, for me as well, it was just like, oh my God, it was just this magical place. I think it's just like the movies and nursery
Yeah.
rhymes you grew up with. And then, I don't know, it was just like, yeah, there's a sense of energy. And I think London specifically, and Londoners are just so welcoming. I mean, for me, as soon as I walked into the city, I just felt home.
Mm.
Like from the get-go, I was just like, oh my God, okay, so I have arrived. And since then, like I've never looked back. And I think it's a diversity. I think it's a diversity how people are. You spoke about your colleague, how she's buying books for her child, and just for people to have that opportunity. And I think it's just this rich opportunity to be able to sit across a table from people with different cultural backgrounds, religions, and lived experiences. I think you as an individual, regardless of what you do in life, as an individual have an opportunity to grow as a human being. I mean, that is just fundamentally, I mean, no money in the world can buy this. It's just crazy. You can watch all the YouTube videos in the world and read all the books, but I mean, this lived experience. I mean, me just learning from you across this, having a chat now with you is just, it's just so enriching for your soul, for your mind. It's amazing.
100%. No, I've loved every minute of living here. I think it's been since 2016 now. So yeah, coming on 10 years. But yeah, every year just continue to learn more, and I'm hoping to stay here for a very long time.
Yeah. So you came here, university.
Yeah.
Were you exploring any other cities, or it was just, okay, London, boom, I know where I'm going to go? And
Yeah, no. So funnily enough, even if I maybe take it a step back, so even before, so when I came to university, I went to Leeds, and just, I guess, touching on some of the immigrant mentality and mindsets of planning a long while in advance. 13-year-old Arnie is sat there thinking, where am I going to be able to go where I have a higher likelihood of, settling in, some of these topics that we've just spoken about, finding a job, getting a visa, etc. And so whilst I, applied to schools in the US, and I got accepted to a few in California, I'd applied to some in Canada, and applied to a few here. I think having spoken with so many different people, intentionally, I realized that the UK and London specifically felt like somewhere, again, the diversity, all that kind of stuff could be very, very useful for me. And so then it was picking a university that had a work placement. Why a work placement? Because I thought, if I have a year as opposed to just a summer to prove my worth in a company, then that's also going to increase my likelihood of hopefully getting an offer. But then not all companies offer work placements, and not all companies offer work placements that then convert into full-time jobs afterwards. So I had to create a list of all of those things like a very, very long time ago, and basically came to Leeds because they offered it, and then applied to Goldman Sachs because they offered a work placement that offered a role afterwards, and then basically followed that path and was very fortunate to be able to execute it and get a job off the back of that. But that was a very long-winded way of saying that it was all very intentional. It was like, where am I going to have the highest chances? I can't leave too many factors uncontrolled, because otherwise then it's kind of like, oh, like I'm going to regret this. So it's like, that was very much the thinking, which I'm sure many people in the immigrant space have just had to think about as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. My partner's European. I've got a lot of European friends, a lot of British friends, and fundamentally, I think it's one of those. I think that piece of document just changes everything. It's just like, holiday is one thing. So, I mean, if I want to travel to France, I need to apply for a Schengen visa. I cannot just walk up and just rack up to the airport and just buy a ticket and just move. Just things like that. But then more so from a place where you want to study, you want to work. It's not about going to a different country and just visiting and spending money in that country, but actually creating a life for yourself, earning a livelihood. The world isn't open. That piece of document does change everything for you. And so I can appreciate, what is going on in that 13-year-old's mind. A very mature 13-year-old, by the way. I'm thinking, wow, that 13-year-old is so strategic in the long-term planning. But also, I think somehow you're just forced to become mature that much more earlier because you also don't have a choice.
Exactly. No, you're spot on. And I think, again, one of the things for me was, at the time I was in South Africa, And a lot of people in South Africa, at least a lot of my friends, like many of them go to the same, primary schools, secondary schools, and they'll stay in the system there as well, because there's some incredible universities there. And so I saw a world where I would probably be following a similar path and just staying there. And for all the reasons that we've spoken about, I just felt that I'd be much better going abroad or elsewhere. And so, yeah, like to your point, you're forced to think about these things in a way that most people never really have to, because they don't know any better, really. I think that does a lot for how far in advance to plan and strategizing. I think we spoke about you touched on holidays, but even at university, I remember just with my friends, they'd be like, "Oh, should we just book for a holiday to go to Portugal in 2 weeks?" And I'm like, no. Hold on, wait a second. I need like at least a month's lead time so I can apply for this visa, get a visa to go to the Schengen space. So it's funny just like seeing them think like, wait, what? You can't just go and turn up. And better still, you mentioned like it's not just tourism; it's actually being able to then go and make a living elsewhere. It's a completely different ballgame, and by the luck of the draw, depending on what country you're born in, there's a passport that is deemed to be really good or not necessarily good, and it can dictate so much.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting, but also I think, mindset plays a big part as well. So I think, like you rightly said, South Africa does have really great universities, and you also, it's the decisions that we make, right? So you could have taken that decision or made a choice at that time, thinking, okay, so I'm here, and you've obviously must have had friends, and you've built a life for yourself, and also you're younger. Why take so much risks? And I mean, South Africa is actually a beautiful country as well. Beautiful people, beautiful country. So you could have just stayed. Why go through so much pain, and move to a different country? It's just so much stress. A lot of people would have taken the other route. So I think it's also, I mean, you also have the opportunity to create opportunity for yourself. I think mindset is really fundamentally important, because I believe we all have 24 hours in a day. It's really what you choose to do within those 24 hours changes everything. I mean, I wouldn't ever speak to you if you were not in this country, so.
Yeah, and we wouldn't be speaking if you take the initiative of creating this podcast.
Yeah, there you go.
It's definitely, there's something to be said about, like you say, within the 24 hours that you've got, just trying to make things move and move the needle. And anytime that you can increase the opportunity, I think it's almost our duty to just try and do that, because of, again, some of the things that we spoke about, the people that allowed us to get to where we are. Like, it'd be a shame if we just sort of sat on our thumbs and didn't really do anything about it. So it's that duty for sure.
Absolutely. So talking about moving the needle and keeping pushing boundaries, you and Goldman Sachs, first of all, arriving here, headache, stress, I mean, how many people actually succeed? So you succeeded. You've not just succeeded. I think you're smashing it in a lot of people's tick box elements. You've moved to the UK. You've graduated. You've got the visa now. You're working for Goldman Sachs. Like, wow. Like you've technically made it. Okay. So then what happens? Why are we here?
Yeah. No. No, it's funny because, again, African parents and the whole narrative of it's banking, law, doctor sort of avenue, and I think there was definitely a lot of pride in being able to join Goldman, just making my parents proud, and myself proud to a certain extent. But I think, truthfully, I realized very, very quickly that working in the investment banking space wasn't something that I wanted to do for the long term. I think there was an element of looking at my managing director and thinking, you are working crazy hours for a large corporation, really not spending much time with your family, kind of just like, again, one piece of a bigger puzzle. And, yes, you might be earning a lot more money and things like that, but are you really living? Are you really feeling like you're doing anything meaningful? And for me, there's an element of trying to convince myself, like, yeah, I'll do this, I'll smash it, I can see myself doing it. But I kept catching myself realizing that this isn't for me. There was something in me that was saying, there is more that you can be doing. And so, I kind of did my time there. I knew that hopefully I get certain skill sets, hardworking, intelligent people constantly pushing you to do the best that you can do. I knew that those things I could learn from that environment that I could hopefully take with me. And so thinking about visas again, I kind of eventually got to the point where I'd worked there and then subsequently Wellington, which is a boutique asset manager as well, to be able to not need to be sponsored to be in the country anymore. And I was tracking that thing day by day. Like, as in the day that I could quit. Another strategy. I was like, okay, the day that I can quit, I'm going to quit to start my own thing. And I remember going into the office to resign from Wellington at the time, and calling my mom, and my mom being like, I'm sure you're really like scared and worried and concerned because obviously you've been in corporate for so long, and like now, like, you're thinking about doing something else. And I was like, Mom, I've never been more sure of anything. I've never been more sure that I want to create something meaningful, or at least I try my hand at the startup space, because I just knew that corporate and working for someone else wasn't the long-term avenue for me. And so, yeah, what had happened prior to quitting is basically my best friend from Kenya, David, who's actually one of my co-founders at my last company and the current one. We had been going through this similar quarter-life crisis, I'd say, of like wanting to do our own thing, but not knowing what. And it just so happened that because we're working in banking, working long hours, after a certain time, you'd be able to get your meals expensed. Right?
Yeah.
And or you'd be able to get
Transport as well.
Yeah, transport as well. Exactly. So we'd done a lot of those, and you basically order a meal and, it can easily go above like £35, and you're thinking like, this is a meal, like maybe a drink, and then delivery, but like, how is it so expensive? Where's all this like leakage happening? So we kind of followed the paper trail and kind of discovered the crazy world of dark kitchens. So for people that aren't familiar, dark kitchens are basically these massive warehouses where there will be, it depends, but there could be like up to between 15 to 30 different sort of pods, and each pod is like a small kitchen. And what people often don't know is some of their favorite foods come from dark kitchens. So they don't actually often come from a restaurant. They'll come from these places that are set up with the purpose of delivery. So it's delivery only kitchens. And because we had lots of time on our hands, we ended up, going to see one of the dark kitchens next to our house and realized all of our favorite brands were just coming from here. And, started interviewing the drivers, started interviewing the chefs, the building owners, and realized that it was a space that was growing a lot. And, eventually actually grew even more because lockdown happened. As you can imagine, people were ordering so much food. But what we noticed was it was kind of very fragmented. A lot of people chefs were still writing, their P&L on like, paper, and it was an industry that needed to be a bit more automated. And so we kind of came together, got one of our engineer friends to kind of build together a very basic MVP of a product that could help these brands kind of have their finger on the pulse, monitor their P&L, logistics, delivery, etc. across the board. And the timing worked out really well for us in that when lockdown happened, we were able to already partner with one of the largest dark kitchen operators in the UK. And we'd organized a sort of 3-month trial period with them where we would basically ingest the information of all of their brands. So you can imagine the largest dark kitchen operator in the UK has multiple locations across the UK. We plug into them, we have access to all their clients. And so we then could able to use their information and build something for not only the dark kitchen operator, but all of their brands as well. And so after the 3 months, they were looking into potentially IPOing, and their investment bankers told them like, look, you guys are basically a real estate company. If you want to, get the lofty valuations that you're looking for, you need to be tech enabled. And these 3 guys here, they're the ones that are going to help.
Oh, wow.
So again, opportunity meeting, timing meeting, a lot of good fortune. We were able to sell the company, and it was an acqui-hire. So we joined and, stayed there long enough to basically make sure we could vest our equity and stuff. But that was one of the wildest, most incredible experiences that I had, going from very much a corporate job where, there's not much leeway for what you can really do in terms of moving the needle, pushing, breaking things, to the complete opposite of like, what do we even do today? Like, it's just, as you're so familiar, that roller coaster of a lifestyle that startups brings. finding yourself when the system breaks, having to deliver the food yourself on a cold Christmas day, like cycling bikes around, and everything else. And so it was an incredible journey, and kind of made me sure that startups were the thing that I wanted to do going forward, sort of that building from 0 to 1. But the one thing I will say though is, whilst I was going a step in the right direction, so away from corporate into startup, I still couldn't find that meaning. So that same meaning that I didn't feel that I had at Goldman, like, why am I doing what I'm doing? What is my real purpose in life? I didn't necessarily feel that I had in the dark kitchen space either. Don't get me wrong, I love food, and I had a lot of free food, which is great, but it wasn't quite the thing that I was really looking for. And so once we left that last company, we really took a step back and wanted to reflect on, how do we find that meaning? And so, looked into our ikigai and did a lot of self-reflection. And for David and I, we, kept coming back to the whole idea of health and what health really does for people and what it unlocks for a life well lived. And so the company that we're building now is very much focused on how we help people live longer and more meaningful lives. So that's the concept behind Unbound, which I'm sure we'll speak about in a second.
Yeah, first of all, congratulations on your exit. Like, I mean, and also it is a wild story. 3 months into building the business, and you already have those conversations sparkling. I mean, and that's like, people work for, try and build a company for, 10, 15 years, and still you don't have those conversations. So that's just fantastic. But I mean, you spoke about purpose and meaning, and I think that's something very deeply interesting topic for me. But what I'm trying to come to is, so you didn't find purpose and meaning when you did that. It was a business where you saw a problem and you're like, oh shit, like I want to solve the problem.
Yeah.
If you didn't have those conversations so early on, I'm guessing most likely you would still be running that business. Let's say if you were running that business and you don't have meaning and purpose, for someone who's maybe starting out today, what is more important, trying to solve a problem or from the get-go having meaning and purpose? Because if you didn't have a meaning and purpose, would you still continue? How would you be operating? Would it be another corporate Goldman Sachs for you?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's one I've really thought about a lot. I think the way that I tried to frame it is, if you do something where you're just solving a problem, I know people who've been able to fall in love with the process of solving the problem, i.e. they get their kick from solving something. And so I know a lot of people who've been incredibly successful kind of doing that sort of thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's completely great. For me, I couldn't kick into that like top gear and have even more sort of, push and drive to really go on for years and years if I don't have that meaning and purpose. And so to your question, I think, with that last business, there would definitely be a point where probably I'd been like, okay, this feels like we've done everything that we need to do, or I still need to find something else that is meaningful to me. Like, so core to me was that finding that meaning and purpose that I would have definitely gone elsewhere. So I think it's for me personally, it's definitely finding that meaning. But it's to also say that I don't think there's a wrong answer in my opinion. I think there's people who just get really pumped about solving a problem, and that's completely fine for them too.
Yeah, and I think maybe not being too hell-bent around that purpose, meaning, or should I do solving a problem. I mean, if you're starting out, I think just start. I think that's also really important. Just start, because we could sit there, procrastinate, and paralysis by analysis and all that. So
Yeah.
just execute. And I think things just open up as you progress. I'm sure you can. I'm just thinking like, wow, this is amazing. You could have also then just kept on getting those meals and then not thinking about it as much, but then you took action, and then that action resulted into something else, and then something else, and then transpired into, wow, an exit. And like who would have thought, So I think taking action is super important as well.
It's the most important thing, arguably, because like you say, an action needs to a reaction, and then more actions. Like if you don't start, then nothing will ever come from it.
Yeah.
And I think even before that action is, like you said, noticing. So you almost have to kind of put yourself in a frame of mind where you are open and looking for opportunities, because otherwise they might just come and pass you by. Like I'm sure many of us, and me included, there's so many things that I probably missed because I just wasn't in the frame of mind or wasn't open to it, but like once you're intentional about that openness and wanting to do something, I think you kind of catch those things, and so that leads to then the action.
Yeah. And I think, purpose as well. I think, a lot of people I speak to, especially younger people, they're like, okay, yeah, but I want to find meaning and purpose, but I don't know what it is. And I think, my experience, I think it's okay for your purpose to also change.
Absolutely.
Because you're changing and evolving as an individual. I mean, nothing should also stay stagnant. You should be in a continuous flow. I don't know if you think about. Yeah.
I completely agree. Like what I'm looking for now is very different to what I was looking for when I was 20, 25, and that would be different to what I'm looking for tomorrow. I'm not going to paraphrase, but I think Mahatma Gandhi said something along the lines of, don't judge me for the things that I said before, because where I am now is a very different place. Like we need to be constantly evolving. That idea of being stagnant is something that I really don't. I actively try and avoid. I want to continue to evolve. The world is changing so fast. It's important to constantly be able to evolve with it. Otherwise, you might be doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah.
Is that what you found as well?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think, and I think it's also, difficult because, although we know change is the only constant, change is also difficult, right? So because you get used to something and then you're in your comfort zone and you don't really want to come out of your comfort zone because it's your happy place. It's also difficult. You're talking about the world moving too fast. I think that also causes a lot of stress and anxiety to people, especially now with the whole AI and AI revolution. I mean, we're building with AI, and I have anxiety every single day. I'm like, oh shit, like what the hell? Like every morning I wake up, like what the hell? Like I can't keep up. So I can only imagine the rest of the world. Like I'm in this space building every single day and I can't keep up.
It's true.
But the thing is, I mean, somehow like you also don't have a choice. Like it isn't ever evolving. It's evolution. Like you have to keep moving. And I think, great things only happen by doing things that are hard, not the things that are easy. So I think it's also, it's very important for us to ask ourselves, what is the real outcome you want from life and from business or anything that you do? Because really your input equals your output, so whatever you give in is what you're going to get out. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for me, it's really about, okay, this is hard. I could be in my comfort zone. We spoke about, this podcast, for example. This is also something I want to do, but I don't want to do. Why? Because I'm coming out of my comfort zone. Now I'm sitting here, making myself vulnerable, doing this where I'm really not a public speaker and I don't want to speak in public and all that, but I'm like, but I have to do it. And off the back of it, every single time when I sit, before I come for a podcast, anxiety and stress, every single time. And I've done this multiple times. But as soon as I finish, I'm like, oh shit, this is just so amazing. I got got to meet a new person in person. And now this relationship that I'm being, able to build with you and all the other guests is just phenomenal. I mean, and that wouldn't have happened if I didn't push myself in that corner and done the thing that is uncomfortable to me. There's just one example. It's just live because we're talking about it on the podcast.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those, really, what is the outcome you want from life? I think that is the question you want to ask yourself.
Yeah, no, that's super powerful. And again, the fact that you keep turning up despite those feelings and those nerves. And I think that's a really good point that you're touching on, because I feel like a lot of people will associate that feeling with like, oh, that's not for me. Like my body's saying, this is not the kind of place that I want to be going into. But actually, again, if you see that as a sense of, this is my body telling me that I'm doing something that is unnatural, and in that discomfort will come the opportunities, the growth, the learnings, then like that reframing just means that you will completely approach everything so differently. Because I can completely relate, man. The number of times I've to this day, I just feel like, whoa, this whole concept of even, I don't know where I heard this, but someone was mentioning that the concept of imposter syndrome actually makes it sound like a negative thing. It's almost like, oh, like I shouldn't really be here. If anything, it's that, you're actively pushing yourself to be in a place where you're not necessarily like 100% best place to do, but the fact that you were doing that should be celebrated. Like, good on you for putting yourself there. And I really like that framing of it means that you're continuing to grow. I think we need to actively seek those moments of discomfort, for sure.
Because you spoke about imposter syndrome, I feel compelled to just say something.
Yeah, please.
So my framing around imposter syndrome, I think it's a privilege.
Okay.
It's a privilege if you have the feeling of feeling like an imposter. Because if you really think about it, if you actually break it down, first principles thinking. So if you actually break it down, why do you have this feeling of imposter syndrome? So you're feeling like an imposter simply because you're doing something technically that you're not good at. Because if you're really good at something, and if you've been doing something for the very long time, you'll not feel like an imposter because you own it and you know it and whatever. So it's only because you're doing something for the first time and you're doing something that you're not good at, and that's why you're feeling like an imposter, because what are people going to think, and I'm not great at it, and whatever. But you're in that position because you have an opportunity. You have an opportunity to do something new. Only when you do something new are you able to learn. Only when you learn are you able to grow, and only when you grow do you succeed. So if you backtrack everything, I mean, I'm just so fortunate that I'm feeling like an imposter today because I'm able to sit in this chair in front of you. Like,
I like the phrase.
like it's an opportunity. Like, I'm feeling like an imposter is, I'm so grateful that I feel like an imposter because the universe has given me this opportunity to feel like an imposter. If I never feel like an imposter, meaning I will never do something new. If I don't do something new, I'm not going to learn something new, and I'm not going to grow, and I'm not going to succeed.
I'm gonna stay
So really the core starts from imposter syndrome. So wow. So instead of celebrating success, the final outcome, you should be celebrating you first feeling like an imposter. Oh wow, now I have an opportunity to grow.
Yeah. And that's exactly comes down to like the way that you've the framing, right? It's like seeing it as a good thing.
Yeah.
As opposed to seeing it as something that I should just completely shy away from.
Absolutely.
And even one of the things that you mentioned earlier, I think one of the biggest things that came out of like lockdown was almost seemed like everyone wanted to start a company.
Yeah.
And I, for one, I want to start companies. That this is really what makes me feel alive. But it was also just to say, I remember speaking with some people and saying, like, some people really enjoy the job that they're doing and really good at their job. And it was a kind of also being able to say, like, as long as you still feel like you're progressing and doing all these things in your current role, then that doesn't mean you should move away from that. Like, startups isn't for everyone.
Correct.
So it was kind of also just managing that. It almost felt like everyone's like, oh, I'm going to start a startup now. And like, no, you can consider it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, especially if you're still getting those feelings of growth and etc. in your current role. So just wanting to mention that as well.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a really, really important point as well, because, social media has absolutely romanticized startups and being a founder and whatever, but the reality is completely different from what social media
Instagram
to be. Is expectation versus reality. It's insane. Like the gap is just whoa. So I mean, by no means I am telling people you should not start a company. But by all means, please do if it's for you. But like you rightly said as well, that doesn't mean if you are not a startup founder or whatever, or even working for a startup, that doesn't change anything. As long as you have that sense of purpose and you're feeling that you're growing. I think growth and constant movement is important, regardless of what you're doing. And if that's you starting a company, great, do that. But really, what works for you, I think internalizing that is super important as well.
100%.
Yeah. So talking about imposter syndrome, and now you're moving into a different company. Hopefully now that's the purpose. Walk me through that as well. So why this? I mean, why is this your purpose, and what are you really doing? What are you really building?
Yeah. So after we sold the last company and took a step back and really were thinking about what we wanted to focus on, I'd say it was like a nice inflection point to reflect on everything that had come to that point. So again, years in banking and starting a company. And as you so rightly said, there's a glamour that comes with the idea of a startup. But really, I was working harder than I was working in banking, only just that I was working for something that, I was building. It was my baby, right? But, experienced burnout through that period, had really close friends lose loved ones, oftentimes through, diseases or illnesses that could have been prevented had they just been noticed a lot earlier. And, the more we spoke with people, we realized that it was very much a commonality. Everyone knows someone or has lost someone or has a close person who's dealing with something that is really, really difficult. And one of the stats that really, really, really kind of took me back and like stuck with me a lot was, 1 in 4 deaths are due to, cardiac related issues, but 4 in 5 of those can be prevented through lifestyle changes. And so there was this like feeling of, I was walking around and you see people spending time with their loved ones and thinking, there is something that we can do to increase the likelihood that we can continue to spend time with our loved ones and do the things that we love, be it through work, hobbies or whatever, if only we were able to know a lot earlier about the state of our bodies. Like the fact that I can pick up my phone and see what's going on in the other side of the world in a second, yet just underneath the hood, most people don't even know what's going on. It really struck a chord. And so it's like, how do we move away from ignorance is bliss to knowledge is power, especially when it comes to our own health? Because the main root of the thing I'm trying to solve for is, if you know that you're well and you're living well, then that can unlock everything else that comes from it. Or at least you can have more comfort that you can continue to do all the things that you want to do for as long as possible. Because I hated the idea of thinking something happens last minute and you're like, crap, we're too far gone. Like, what if? And the what if could have happened so much earlier. And so for me, it was a really personal thing of like, I feel that my biggest purpose in life is to help people unlock their full potential, and unlocking people's full potential comes with also unlocking their ability to live well. And so it was something that my co-founder and best friend for 16 years, David, also had in a very similar guise. And, when we looked around at the industries, there's traditional healthcare, which in the UK and with the NHS is a very particular situation, and for the incredible things that the NHS has done, the UK is still one of the countries that spends way more on sick care than it does on preventative care. And it's lagging a lot of its peers. I think just last year, the UK was called the sick man of Europe.
Wow.
And you then look at some of the more newer companies that are kind of trying to help people take the healthcare into their own hands. So you've got companies where you can basically get sort of DIY blood test at home. You prick your finger and you send like samples away, and they've done a really good job at kind of putting that, the onus of looking after yourself into people's hands. But still, the experience is very much one of a point in time. So you get, I'm using the blood draw as an example. You get your blood drawn, or you see your doctor, or you go to the NHS, whatever it is, or even private care, and then until you see that person maybe 6 months down the line or next year, you're kind of still left to your own devices as to what you do with your health. And for us, we felt like that was the massive gap missing there. It's like, how do you help people who have even been able to check themselves, then feel that they are supported along the way in making those like health outcomes meaningful? And what we were seeing when we spoke with our peers is, unfortunately, even though people care more about their health now, people are wearing Oura rings and Whoops, and people using Zoe for them, their gut microbiome, like, wellness has never been more front and center. But in terms of that then being sustainable, there's still a massive gap there. And so what we're trying to do in a nutshell is become the behavior change engine that incentivizes and allows people beyond just their test to, glean the right results, agree on certain goals, and then support you along the way. So it's a combination of like a digital platform as well as a physical space, because the physical space we feel is what will move the needle here, because health so far has been very siloed. It's very isolated. I go to the hospital maybe by myself. I do my blood test by myself. I don't really speak to other people, maybe my family, but I don't really normalize that conversation. It's like, how do we move to a world where, we embrace the element of community, that social element that makes us all human, that allowed us to become the species that we are, and put that all together. So it's making like a culturally resonant social brand that incentivizes people to live a healthier lifestyle by having their finger on the pulse. So you have your blood tests, you'll, maybe get abilities to, earn rewards for things that are meaningful to you. Because with AI, we can now tell, maybe if you're, I have an Apple Watch, maybe I can tell that, say you ask them love to cycle, I can be able to say, okay, through your Strava, if you stay with Unbound, and you hit these certain metrics, then we will give you access to a Rafa jacket that you've been wanting for a long time, or you can at least get a significant discount towards it. So using AI as well to be able to create a really accurate picture of someone, so that along the years we can continue to evolve with them and their health. So it's really like picking together some of the disparate things that we feel are missing from the health system, but also drawing on some of the things that have been so core to being human and packaging into one product. So it is easily, and I just ran the London Marathon, so I don't say this lightly, it is easily the biggest challenge that I will be taking on. This is something that we see as our life's work. And it's something that, again, at the very core, we think will allow people to be able to live longer lives, but also healthier ones and more enjoyable ones, because they can do all those things with the comfort of knowing that at least I'm well. And if I'm not well, I've noticed early enough so that hopefully I can do something about it.
First of all, congratulations on running the London Marathon. You've made me jealous. I know a lot of people in my team are jealous, and I know a lot of people who are listening to this pod are going to be jealous, because it's like a long waiting list. Like, people just, it's just crazy. But I mean, congratulations. That's just fantastic. And also, it was one of the hottest days a couple of weeks ago when you ran. Today is really cold, but I mean, congratulations.
Thank you
on that. I'm going to talk about, it's interesting, while you were talking, I was already thinking about the challenges. So we'll speak about the challenges. But before that, I'd like to share something as well. So 5-6 weeks ago, I also went through something. I woke up about 3 a.m. full of sweat. And then I'm like, okay, this is weird. I changed, and then I woke up at 4 a.m. again, left chest pain, left arm pain, shortness of breath. I'm like, oh my God, like, what am I, like, am I having a heart attack? I called the paramedics, emergency. The paramedics came home, ECG, everything's fine. They took me to the A&E, blood work, everything was fine. They did like a delayed blood work. Okay. Everything was fine. But then, because the symptoms were like a heart attack, then they asked me about family history, whatever. So my mom, dad, both, heart diseases, both have stents. My dad had a heart attack. Grandparents, paternal, maternal, all of them, heart conditions. So they're like, okay, we're just going to send you for more tests. Anyway, long story short, I now also have 2 stents in my arteries. So I went through that, procedure myself. So when you spoke about, the cardiac events, I feel unfortunate, because I had like an angina attack and I didn't have a stroke or a heart attack. Okay. But a lot of people, because an angina attack is also like, I felt the pain, but afterwards I was okay. Like, perfectly normal. So, you hear this so many times, and I can resonate as well. It's like, oh shit, this person was okay. Day to another had a heart attack and just died. Like, like, what the hell happened? But it's never day to another. It's compiled over decades. Yeah. And a lot of people perhaps have many strokes or like angina attacks, and they just, don't really feel much, don't really think about it. And then priorities just kick in. I just had to, I was fortunate. I don't know what it was that I kept on going. And then finally it came to the conclusion, oh shit, like I had to, I had blockages, and then I had to basically put stents in. Anyway. Sorry to hear that. So a lot of people actually maybe are not as fortunate. And then finally it comes to that, when it's, oh shit, like it's too late. So I think what you're doing, we started from the immigrant journey, and I could resonate. And what you're doing now is like, oh shit, this is my lived experience. Like, this is just crazy for us to even have that conversation. So like, I can tell you how important that is for people, like, because I am that person. So this is just fantastic what you're doing. So again, second, congratulations. I think it's really important. And the stats, I know the stats as well. You said 1 in 4. A lot of them are also men, especially when you look at cardiovascular diseases, because women come into the picture after menopause, because before menopause they have this hormone which prevents them from any heart conditions. So I think it's great. I think it's fantastic. And I think it's also the need, because one of the staggering stats that I've been now, obviously because I've gone through this now, I'm reading and I'm looking at stats as well. Absolutely. Now. One of the staggering stats also is the younger generation. So, back in the days, cardiac, heart conditions was only limited to older people. But because of our lifestyle changes and social media, stress, anxiety, whatever, it's a lot of younger people in the 20s, 30s, 40s, like it's crazy. Like, I mean, I've been I am one of the younger people now within this whole space, and from the operation to now the rehab that the NHS is providing as well. But I mean, the stats are just staggering, from the deaths to the cardiac events and the post-ops. A lot of young generation are coming into the mix, and that number is only growing year by year.
Yeah.
Which is like, oh shit, like something needs to be done.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I couldn't agree more. And you add to the mix the fact that, the US General Surgeon said something like the impacts on people of, social isolation and loneliness equate to smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
And, loneliness is a
Wow.
very big thing at the moment for a lot of people, especially off the back of lockdown and in big cities like London, particularly for young people. You just see how there is very much this, it's these weird parallels of, well, not weird, they make sense. The fact that wellness is having the moment that it's having, and I shouldn't say the word moment, definitely it's having the progression that it's having, comes in tandem with people realizing that like they're having so many difficulties and so many challenges, like some of the ones that you mentioned. And so it is definitely now, it's so needed, it's so relevant to be trying to do something that allows people to understand now rather than later that, if something's developing, as you say, it happens over years, like be able to monitor it, manage it. I just, the thing that keeps coming back to me that I really hate the idea of, because, I've lost loved ones in similar things, is finding out too late. And the problem, I guess, the negative side of having been so lucky of having something like the NHS, where you just people expect here in the UK to have something like an entity that will take care of them, is that people aren't necessarily always as proactive as they could be. And so again, for all the good things that the NHS does as well, because they're so inundated, I couldn't just rock up there and say I would love to get my blood drawn, because they have to deal with so many other things. It's you would need to be coming with some sort of illness or something that you're looking to, which is an actual concern. And so it's like you also need to then create, and that's why there's companies that are looking to do this, is like, how do you then create companies that allow people who want to be proactive to have an outlet to go and do those things? And that's where, we want to fit in as well.
Yeah, and I think, talking about the NHS, NHS gets a lot of bad rap, but my experience has just been fantastic.
Phenomenal.
And the people there, I mean, just working in the NHS, like, it's a high stress job. I mean, but the work they do is just magic.
Incredible.
And the smile on the faces, like, also, like, I mean, showing up the way they show up every single day is like, wow, like I couldn't do that. It's crazy.
They're some of the best people ever.
Oh,
and they should be given their dues so much.
100%. And fundamentally, I think what they need is that support. So taking that load off, I think that is more than anything else. Like, just take the load off these guys. Like, these guys are just like,
exactly,
too much pressure.
Exactly. And that's where, the view is to never replace the NHS. It's to be able to say, take the load off and help in ways that we hopefully can. And it's, it's paramount. You kind of want to work together to solve for, the way that the world is moving, rather than, try and work against one another. And I think generally speaking, there is a big appetite to partner in many ways.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, business talk, like off the back of it already, I'm thinking, oh shit, so many challenges. But I think one of the challenges, maybe not challenges, there are companies like insurers, such as ULife, for example. I mean, they also do something similar. When you take care of your health, you get like, points, and like you get your premium knocked off and all that, because they're also focusing on that prevention element. So how do you see, do you see a collaboration with insurers, or do you see them being a threat, that kind of model in something that you're doing?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So we are going way more for the D2C model to begin with. It's obviously a very difficult one to crack for various reasons, but the sort of demographic and target market that we're going for, a lot of them don't even currently use the likes of ULife. But in terms of the business model that they have, it would be similar in that respect, in that you incentivize people to, get benefits from exhibiting positive behaviors. You mentioned, or you didn't mention, but Vitality is one of the best companies that has shone a light on the fact that, out of South Africa as well, that, over years, I think they did a study with LSE to show that people of various ages when they were incentivized, were able to eat better diets, exercise more, etc. So that's something that we definitely want to replicate. But the partnership with insurance companies, it's something that we'd be open to looking at in future. And to be complete transparent, I can't name any just yet, but we're having some interesting conversations with some now, because a couple have seen our target customer as one that they haven't currently tapped into. And so almost through us, there's an ability for them to potentially offer some of their, sort of insurance policies. But also separate to insurers, there's also, once you start getting a certain level of data at an anonymized level, of course, there's opportunities for, wanting to understand some of their models, not just insurers, but, there's other companies also in the financial sector and others who might find sort of more aggregate levels of data quite interesting. But just to your specific question about insurers, there's scope for a partnership, but it's not something that we're looking to entertain just immediately. It's very much more of a DTC angle, people who don't currently really have access to insurance already.
So then your D2C, so your ICP would be, is it people who are already aware? Because I'm just thinking about, we got education. Oh, wow. Educating the market is so expensive. It's going to take a lot of time. And also behavioral change. That is also very difficult. So you're talking about the younger demographics who are already health conscious.
Exactly.
Got it.
Health conscious people have probably tried Zoe, have, tried to stick by a diet, but when able to do it sustainably, have enjoyed going to the gym. They know that it's good for them, but for various reasons haven't been able to do something meaningful sustainably. And what we're finding with a lot of our user research is, there isn't that hook, because even the most disciplined people, when it comes to their health, still a lot of the time will have moments of lapses, or will be like, they'll go off the bandwagon. So that behavioral change of like that hook of, I'm getting that, that access to that piece of merch, which I really love because I'm doing a really healthy behavior. That's like, that makes sense. And so you're then getting them to actually look forward to that reward, but in the process of doing that, they're doing something really good for themselves. And so you hopefully get that sort of cycle that builds on itself over years. And as you can imagine, the more you get to know someone and you evolve with them, then there's also scope to do things like, people have spoken a lot about medical passports. And so, that's another level of complexity, but you very much see a world with the development of AI now, whereby, say, you had to go to Cape Town or potentially Rio for work or something, then you could also have like a health companion or a passport that, say, God forbid something were to happen. If you had to go to the hospital, there is your information available via this one platform that can just be pulled in from, so that we don't need to ask you questions and figure out what it is that your background is. It's already kind of there. And so you can see how it can become this sort of lifelong health companion. It elevates your lifestyle, but also, it helps with your health. That's the sort of long-term vision that we can see it kind of sitting within.
I love it. Just the one, again, talking about challenges.
Yeah, please.
So love where you're going, and health and wellness obviously hasn't been bigger. Like, I mean, it's huge today. Like, it's just crazy how huge it is. Even if you don't know about it, people are that much more conscious. People are, because inevitably you are living longer. Yes, the lifespan has increased, and you just don't want to live long. You want to also have a good quality of life. So people are also that much more conscious about their health these days. But I mean, so again, it's a big space and very competitive, as we know. So are you starting out with, are you bootstrapping, or from the get-go you've got investors, any past investors who are also interested in this business? Like, I mean, what's the game plan?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's, if you just looking at the States, and people might disagree, but a lot of the time, what we found with our last company is a lot of things that happen in the States might, kind of trickle down sort of 2 to 3 years later here, potentially accelerating now. But in the US, especially in California, the amount of movement that is happening. There's companies like Function Health, which is Mark Hyman, who is sort of one of the co-founders. They've raised a huge Series A, and there's a company called Superpower, which I think just raised a 30 million Series A as well. Basically operating all in the space of preventative healthcare. There's acquisitions happening. There's a lot of momentum, and in some ways, we're finding it quite interesting because it's drawing a couple of initial parallels with what was happening in the dark kitchen / delivery space a few years back, where there's a very growing industry and a lot of players trying to come in, but eventually it potentially becomes this race to the bottom. And so we're being very intentional about why we want to differentiate. And what a lot of these companies are doing is they're very much focused on trying to capture as many people as possible and offering these sort of blood tests, which, again, you can't really differentiate on blood tests. The differentiation kind of comes the layer above that. And so a company more locally here called Neko Health, which is co-founded by the Spotify founder, Daniel Ek, they've done an incredible job at creating this incredible experience. So it's, you go into this futuristic, almost sci-fi looking space. They've condensed what would typically take sort of 4 weeks of booking an appointment, going to see your GP, getting results into the space of an hour. So you walk away having already got your results, which is really, really, really quick. But still, the problem comes back to once you leave that hospital room,
then what?
And I'll speak candidly. I've done so much R&D. I've gone and tried all in these scenes, and I went with specific problems because I've been monitoring my health for a while. And again, the feedback was kind of like, oh well, see you next year. And we think that that's where everyone is missing the point, because that's a point in time. The other remaining days of the year need to be actualized. Again, those 24 hours each day, you need to be doing things to make sure that when you come back next year, like you're on track with the plan. And so all that to say that in order to create something that is going to move the needle and really pushes that, we need to raise a lot of money. And what we've done to this point is we just raised a friends and family round. Not because we needed to raise at the moment, because we've been able to bootstrap, but we wanted to get strategic investors involved from day dot. So one of our co-founders, third co-founders, we met in August last year as we were sort of ideating on Unbound, is one of the co-founders of WeWork, Miguel McKelvey.
Oh, wow.
And we met him at a time where he was also trying to think about what it was that he wanted to sort of invest as his next big project. And he has been very open about saying that he wants the next thing that he does to be as big, if not bigger than, that sort of thing. And so we wanted to basically supercharge ourselves with, people who can either open doors for future VC rounds, people who are experts in the medical space, people who can unlock doors for brand partnerships. So like have a subset of people who can come on and be our active ambassadors, and who come on not because of the check that they can write, but because they're going to actively do something for us. And we made those stipulations very clear. So we're very selective about who we let in our friends and families round. And that's what we've been using to this point. And we're currently focused on building the product with our group of beta testers. But in order to take it to that next level, we'll definitely be looking to raise, I'd say, towards the end of this year, so that we can really then catapult into going beyond just the UK, which is our current core focus, and in which some ways we actually think is a benefit for us, because whilst there's so much movement and activity and things happening over in the States, we have an ability here to really differentiate and create something that is culturally resonant here, and potentially expand to Europe and then the Middle East, and kind of focus on this side of the world and the nuances that it has, so that this can really be our home. And I think that is where we see our probable ability to really stake our claim as the main focus of the UK and Europe.
And what's the end goal with this company? I mean, where do you see this whole thing transpiring into? What is it? I mean, what's the impact?
The impact is healthier people living longer, more healthily, doing the things that they love for longer. That for me is the simple future that I see. If I can have a role to play in, saving someone heartache from losing a loved one, allowing them to do the things that they love to do for longer, like that is what gets me up in the morning and gets me excited, genuinely. And already, just with some of the people that we've spoken to, just some of the things that they've noticed, like they've just been so grateful. Like, wow, I had no idea. Like the majority of people who we've started already testing have never done a blood test before.
Oh, wow.
And that speaks volumes, right? Because the government is also trying to do a lot to have a program now. They're trying to get people like builders and others who would typically not ever do a blood test to really appreciate the importance of them. And so just even that conversion already, like that, we're getting people who would never even consider it to do it, and then, be willing to do something with it. Like we're capturing the attention of people, and that really is quite an exciting thing to think that, like, we can potentially have an impact on how people go on to live and spend the rest of their lives. That for me is like just hard to put into words how much it like makes me feel like really pumped about what we're doing.
Well, I mean, I think, like I said, I shared my personal journey as well. That last couple of weeks obviously has now enabled me to think about things like I'm thinking. I've always been health conscious, but like now I'm thinking about health from a completely different lens, because like, oh shit, like I went through this, and also being more cognizant of, what is happening around the world, and, the things that inside you cannot see. Like I can completely resonate with that. So if you're able to give that ability to people, I think that's going to be a game changer for not just for themselves, but also for the people around them. I think is really important, because I know when I went through that episode, how my partner felt, how my mother felt, how everybody's like, what the hell just happened?
Right.
Like this guy's so young, he's so fit, like what just happened,
That's the scary part.
Yeah.
I love sports. I've been playing sports for the longest time, had the typical story of, if it wasn't for a career-ending injury, I'd have been a football player. Like, but, I outwardly, I felt like everything was good. Like, I associated outward physical, kind of fitness as, being synonymous with inward, health. But I've had so many experiences myself, where I've realized, like it doesn't just work that way.
No.
And I even probably went too far. So I went into what I would call, the term these days is like biohackers, right? People will at all costs want to make sure that every single variable that can be looked into, experimenting to see how things work, is actualized. But I went so deep into it and realized that most people won't want to be able to live their lives that way.
No.
And also personally, I don't think it's a healthy way to live your life, to be so overly indexed on that kind of thing, because then it takes away from the actual element of living. And so the biggest draw for me was like, how do we help people live sustainably but enjoyably, not live at all costs? Because living at all costs is arguably not living. So it's like finding that right balance. And I think it really just does start with having an insight into your body in a way that is as simple as getting a blood test, which a lot of people still haven't done. And then that opens doors for way more things that you can help with, that behavioral engine, incentivization, making it like sort of a lifestyle brand. Because I touch on lifestyle brand because, unless it's like a sponsorship at like a marathon or something like that, you won't see people walking around with like a health, like a healthcare, like a hospital brand on their t-shirt, right? It's not something that people like think is good, but
it's not sexy.
It's not sexy, right? But so it'd be create a brand that is almost at the intersection of like culture. So like still like even fashionable, but interesting, like is resonant, speaks the language that our target market wants to understand. Isn't just
a great example.
Exactly. Whoop has done a really good job at like normalizing people caring about their health. But what we're actually also seeing, which is really interesting, is there is almost too much data as well.
Correct.
So I had a Whoop for a year, and my personal perspective was there was so much information on there, and I was only scratching the surface of what it was actually doing. Like it's almost giving me too much.
Correct.
And what we're finding, a lot of the trends that are happening now, is people almost want to just be told, like based on these 3 things that we have gained from your blood test and your wearable, this is what you should be focused on. Like people just want to know, like just tell me, rather than like, oh, this is all the information. I need to then go and decipher it.
Get a data scientist.
Yeah. So it's like, how do we make it a more seamless understandable experience. So there's all the kind of things that we're contending with, which, as I mentioned at the very beginning, is easily going to be like the biggest thing that we've taken on. It's one of those things that will either absolutely do incredibly well or, you know, will flop. But we want to take it in the direction that it needs to be in front of everyone. Like, this needs to be something that really moves the dial on how people experience and understand their health. There needs to be a complete shift in the health paradigm. And we're hoping we can be the ones to do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you're doing a phenomenal job, and you've been very strategic from the age of 13 in how you plan your life. So I'm sure there's a lot of strategy going behind, you know, this new business as well. And for sure, I don't think it's if, it's only when. I mean, already the looks of it, I mean, both you and your co-founder have, you know, an exit. You guys are experienced. You have a third co-founder who obviously has, you know, amazing experience as well. So I think the momentum, like we spoke about taking action, so that momentum has already started. And I think it's so important. It's not just the need of the hour. I think it's just fundamentally, I mean, we spoke about it's very difficult to create behavioral changes, but I think when things are sexy, when there's a cultural kind of lift to it as well, you do somehow are able to create behavioral changes as well. I think, and I think that is huge impact. And I think, you know, I think it's just coming back full circle now. We spoke about how it's our fundamental duty to stop, the negative aspects at our generation, so that the younger generation has a better chance at life, really. I think same thing goes with your business as well. So, okay, what can we do today so that it serves a bigger and greater purpose for the next generation? I think that is also super important.
Spot on.
Yeah.
You've said it better than I could say it myself. That has definitely been one of the, you know, sort of focused and shining lights throughout my life. Is like, again, coming back to the idea of people evolving, I think as I was able to identify what my meaning was, and being able to allow people to make those positive changes, it feels like all of those things have come together to create this company and this purpose and this project. So it feels like the stars have aligned in a lot of ways. This is like the third chapter, but yeah, it's the one that I'm the most excited about.
Well, I'm excited for you. I mean,
Thank you.
all the best, all the best. Coming back to that 13-year-old, you've come a long way, Arnold. What would you tell your 13-year-old self today?
My fiance asked me this question the other day. I would say, don't grow up too quickly. Which might sound counterintuitive given all the things that it has allowed me to this point, and hopefully will continue to allow me to do. But I think there's an element of not letting planning and focus and overthinking also stifle the ability to just be open-minded and just creative, and, like, you know, indulge creativity in a way that maybe too much dogged focus cannot allow. And I think when I went into banking, I completely pushed aside any of my creative impulses and things like that. Like, I was like, I'm just going to become this. This is my focus. When I went into this, our last company, it was very much like, this is going to be my everything and anything, to the point where I just wasn't looking at anything else out of it. And with this, I realized that there's so many things outside of the actual work in life that are so impactful on my work, but also vice versa. And so the ability to bring it all together rather than be so narrow-minded. So I'd basically say to him, like, you know, don't grow up too quickly. Like, allow yourself time to just, you know, explore, experience, like, sit with the creativity. It'll all mean something, and it will allow you to do things later.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Arnold. It was fantastic talking to you. I think you're doing great things. I think you've also made your 13-year-old proud. It was important for your 13-year-old to be strategic, but I think it's an important lesson for people listening as well, because a lot of young people, especially, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, things do map out, plan out. You know, just don't be too hard on yourself. I think that is also important. So I think and I wish you all the best. And it was absolute pleasure talking to you. And hopefully, we can do another catch up when you've launched and you're changing lives. And I will be one of your customers, surely.
Love to hear that. That's all I wanted to
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna be one of your customers. So yeah, do let us all know, when you go live, and you guys can all find Arnold on LinkedIn. Although he's on stealth mode now, but he will be doing that unveiling of the business very soon. So yeah, I wish you all the best, and absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thanks, Asim. Likewise, really appreciate you having me, and look forward to keeping the dialogue for sure. Thank you.